First of all, it's a challenging read. There's a lot in here. It's an academic book. It's not a popular book like most yoga books are.
Where are the photographs?
There's no
How come there's no photographs of Edward Clark in there?
There's a chart, a few charts. Well, I think we were motivated to write the book because we really saw a niche in the market, since there was really nothing written that was academic or dealt with pedagogy in terms of teaching yoga.
And there is also another sort of niche that looks at what the commercialism or the current social scene of yoga has
the social
produced.
Aspects, yeah.
But there seemed to be, apart from very pop books, nothing that was academically written about the actual way yoga is taught.
So many people are doing vinyasa yoga. It's so much more popular than more still or practice of asana.
The techniques then in vinyasa are sort of this physically expansive, these ways of moving one's mind, one's body into an interaction with the other, with reality. Asana, on the other hand, which is what most people do associate with yoga, is more self-negating. It tries to cut off from the senses in order to inspect inwardly. There's a very life-affirming, engaged quality to vinyasa, which asana is quite the reverse. In fact, you know, I mean, typically in the metaphoric writings about asana, you are meant to die to the personality, the form, the existence you have, in order to be reborn into a different understanding of reality. But it is utterly removed, traditionally, from tactile, you know, actual sensual engagement of any sort, which sounds like no fun at all, but evidently it's really blissful.
Yeah. You know, enhancing the ritual quality of class, I think, is an important part of pedagogy. And it seemed so obvious it was a ritual. It was also surprising to us, I think, that no one had written about that and said, this is a ritual. You know, let's take advantage of that.
Critical acceptance, which is, you know, you provisionally accept a hypothesis and then you critically evaluate it through experience.
And I think that was something we felt was missing in teachers we had known, or missing in our students, was that they were just parroting a lot of what their teacher was saying, or teaching a class out of a sequence in a book, instead of questioning everything. People talk about yoga being 15,000 years old if you're a Kundalini practitioner, or 5,000 if you're a Hatha yoga person or whatever.
But really, it's maybe 100 years old.
Maybe.
The bulk of the practice now is largely from the 1920s, 1930s. You know, what was a vibrant living thing 80 years ago, or even 50 years ago, becomes a museum piece because nobody dares to evolve something.
So every other discipline has changed. Why yoga can't evolve, why there's a pushback against that, is interesting to us.
I mean, opera and ballet being two other examples where they went through a difficult period where they became very precious about what we have always been and the traditions.
Classical.
And yet, now, you know, both ballet and opera are viewed as being quite avant-garde, and they've sort of gotten ahead of things again because people have gone, it's time to innovate, otherwise it will die. Be aware requires one to enter into an overtly sensual relationship with the universe.
The thing that yoga does for me, and why I fell in love with it, was the sense of embodiment I had in myself, you know, just being fully in myself. And then both being embodied but also embedded in whatever environment that I'm in, and the absolute awareness of that and the increased awareness of that is so empowering. Also, is not just empowering in terms of being physically empowering, it's empowering in terms of my understanding myself. So I am self-aware because I know this thing, this vessel I'm in, and how it works, and I feel fully in it.
When we create meaning, there is a somatic element inevitably involved. So we don't actually create meaning from an abstract conceptual level down to the body, but we actually, through our experience, develop what a philosophy is. The way we experience the world is really the way in which we philosophize. Yet, people look at the word philosophy and think it's going to be a bunch of boring old guys in white beards with curvy pipes going, yeah, so this was a very ultra-materialist sort of thing, you know, and it's like philosophy has been turned into something boring.
Or they see it as something purely of the mind, again, this sort of dualism between the mind and the body. But in particular, in a physical discipline like yoga, of course, there has to be a physical philosophy. There has to be a way of viewing the world that has to do with movement. It also has to do with this, again, this wanting to privilege the mind as the place where all meaning-making happens, when we know that meaning-making starts happening from the body itself. All I am inside is the sum total of every experience I've had in this body.
I don't think yoga in particular has much to do with that, but doing anything physical or simply applying focus and concentration, that usually helps people.
For example, the Iyengar system does is give prescriptions to postures and sequences so that it makes claims that this posture is good for X and this posture is good for Y and this practice is good for relieving
insomnia.
Whatever. Yeah, insomnia. But the truth of the matter is, it's the way that you execute the posture that gives its impact and its effect. So, for example, if I'm going to practice a headstand with my eyes closed, it has a very different impact on me than practicing it with my eyes open and having it move instead of being still. That's a very different feeling of a headstand. So to say a headstand achieves a sense of relaxation can't be right. Right? Because it can't always be right, at least, right? It has to sometimes achieve something else.
Not to say that it doesn't relieve,
well, not to diminish the importance of the placebo. So if it works, it worked great.
It is slightly dishonest for teachers to over the board claim this is good for anxiety, this is about stress relief.
And this is where the dishonesty of a teacher can backfire on them. So, for example, let's say I'm teaching a class and I say, oh, we're going to go into this back bend and this is going to make everybody feel happy, because when you open your heart, you feel happy. But this person gets on their block that they've stuck them on, that they've forced them onto, and says, this is making me absolutely anxious because back bends give me anxiety, which for many people, they're a fearful place. So then that student says, wait, this teacher told me I was going to feel good. They're prescribing an emotion, they're prescribing a sensation, an impact for that person that they have no business doing, you know, because that person's going to get their own experience out of that. And then they don't trust that teacher because that teacher said, oh, this is going to happen.
Or they blame themselves,
they blame
even
themselves
worse.
Yeah. And so the truth of the matter is, we can only teach what we know, and we can only deliver the yoga, and whatever it does for someone is their business. You know, it's up to them what it does for them. I can just give you the, you know, provide a space, provide a venue for you to have this experience, and guide you into helping you have it. I can't have the experience for you. I think for me, the most critical issue is that, for the most part, we're using teacher trainings to teach people yoga instead of teaching them how to teach. And I know why this is happening. It's happening because the studio model is a difficult one to maintain, financially, and so people are using teacher trainings in order to be financially solvent, and they'll take anybody in a teacher training who will pay for it. And so what's happening is they're having to teach them yoga instead of teaching them how to teach, when people should already have been advanced practitioners before they're teaching. And what also it's created is this situation where so many people are yoga teachers, like everybody's a yoga teacher at the studio, so that the quality of being a teacher isn't respected anymore. It's not seen as anything special or important like it used to be. And it's much more difficult for people to want to learn things from people that are challenging if they don't have respect for the teacher and understand that learning yoga takes a long time.
So when you've got people entering the teaching training and then the profession who haven't gone through this lengthy period of learning their craft, they don't have anything to teach.
You know, the Yoga Alliance is an industry organization. It is not about yoga. It is about the business of yoga. And I think that risks, again, denuding the more interesting aspects of yoga. It just takes all the potential out of what the practice can do. That you should only teach what you know. So one of the ways that the book should help people is, hopefully you'll know more, but most of what you know, I mean, just from reading it, but most of what you know from your own physical experimentation. People
end up teaching so many classes that they never actually do their own practice anymore. Certainly, I think the thing that we've found when we've been teaching, so many teachers are burnt out. They've just lost the thrill, the thing that made them actually passionate about this has been lost through doing too much teaching. And that shouldn't really happen. A great teacher is incredibly entertaining. That they take you through the ideas, they lead you on a journey, and it's intellectually fun. In the case of yoga, it should be physically fun as well. That it's like, oh my God, this is the most stimulating thing I could be doing today for the teacher as well as for the student.
You know, that we're allowed to be critical thinkers in yoga. I can take this somewhere that nobody's taken it before. It's not a violation of some rule in yoga. The answers are not already there. The ancients didn't know anything, maybe, you know. And I'm allowed to entertain other people's ideas, this critical acceptance, just long enough so I can experiment with this and figure out on my own whether it's right or wrong. It's just critical thinking. I mean, yoga is global, you know, and the Western style of yoga, as it's become the Western style of yoga, has been globalized. And so we do see similar practices everywhere in terms of the physicality. I think that the differences occur culturally, and those are the things that have to be taken into consideration, I think, when yoga is taught in different places. So, for example, the suggestion that you were making about yoga being a religion, you know, if it's perceived of as a religion in that culture, then it needs to be presented in a way that it isn't a religion. It has maybe a lot of the spiritual talking that you may have somewhere else in another culture is taken out of it so that it can accommodate, right, the values and beliefs and ideals of that particular culture. Again, it has to be relevant to the people that are practicing it, right? So it's understandable that it's different. I think it's mostly in the presentation and the meaning it's given, though. I don't really think the physical practice, exactly what you're doing, differs. And in fact, it doesn't, in terms of physical philosophy, it really doesn't matter what you're doing.
For me, very much, there's an idea that beauty, the experience of beauty is potent in all things, at all times, that there is, it's an experience that's waiting to be awakened. We use an example in the book of, if you're looking at a sunset, you have an experience of that beauty, and probably the experience involves feeling slightly small but engaged in it all, but you know, before the magnificence of those clouds up there and the colors in the sky and how the sea is going, and so that experience happens because you are there, the experience of beauty doesn't happen if the person isn't there. But at any time, in any condition, even the soft tablecloth is a beautiful thing if you perceive it as such.
People always talk about, oh, take it off the mat, you know, and into the world, you know, your practice. But really what we're saying is, why ever limit it to a mat? The actual yoga isn't the postures. So we make a distinction between theory, method, technique, and form. It's one of the ways that we understand pedagogy, or we outline pedagogy in the book. And the form is actually what you're doing. The form can be anything. What's important is not the form. The important thing is the perspective that we take while we're doing it and the way that we execute it. You know, the execution and the perspective. And I think that that's what aesthetics is about, you know, to take that position.
And this is what a teacher does, is they set certain parameters. They put the frame around where people are going to generate their focus and their concentration. One of the things that works for me is perceiving yoga as an aesthetic phenomenon. And I say yoga is a revealer of beauty. And, the early Greeks, the pre-Socratic Greeks, had sayings like, there is friendship in all things, which you know, like, oh my God, what a great idea. I am friends with the little thing that I cut my vegetables up with, and I'm friends with the tablecloth. And because this respect and this genuine appreciation for something exists. This is what I think is potent in yoga in all cultures.
When we talk pedagogically about how to teach, we've divided up this knowledge to help people understand pedagogy, to help people understand that what their knowledge is, that they should have a theory, they should have techniques which experiment with and bear out that method, and then they need to practice it on a form. But that form can be anything. It could be a yoga posture as easily as it could be a sunset, or as easily as
washing the dishes.
Or washing the dishes, exactly. And we should be able to see this really important meaning in everything that's even mundane. That's when you're practicing yoga. The only way that we can promote our book is by being ourselves. And I do think we were brave in a lot of the things we've said in this book, but I think they're true, and the mirror needs to be held up for us to improve. I know that you're capable of reading this. I know that you're capable of doing this at this level, and that's why I'm talking to you like this. I'm not talking to you like you're a child, or you need to be, this has to be simplified because your little head can't possibly understand it as a yoga teacher, because you're probably like that flaky, you know, sitcom sidekick that always does yoga, that cute girl that's an airhead. You know, we want to change that perception.
It's kind of curious, I mean, just talking about that, because, you know, who are the spiritual guides of today, the people who are looked up to, you know, and for the most part, people learn their life lessons from pop songs. And there's a sentimentality, of course, that goes along with that.
Apparently, people get their news from Instagram. The majority of people get their news from Instagram. I found that interesting.
The wisdoms of our era have become, certainly in a Western context in particular, things like rock on. That is, you know, carrying on rock and roll with you know, funny devil fingers or whatever like that. And those have become philosophies of a kind. And when, you know, when I wonder about the world, I just put on this song by the Rolling Stones or whomever, you know, and go that sort. So it's strange that more conventional sort of arbiters of wisdom, like yoga teachers or people in religious fields, are not really much respected these days. And it's hard to see how that's going to change, or what might actually come about. And it makes me, I'm inclined to think that actually wisdom has always been a very underground thing, and that it is a niche thing, and the real development that goes on is comparatively secret. The things that are going on broadly in the world, the pop reality where people get most of their information from, is not what's going to last. It is by nature popular now,
yeah.
which means it's not meant to last.
In this culture, or most cultures, to talk about your own skills or qualities, it's not a humbling thing. But the truth of the matter is, there are no two people who have written a book together that have more experience in this field than Ed and I. Whether we're good at it or not, you can judge for yourself, but we have a lot of miles on the clock. We've both taught for 40-some years.
When there are so many teacher trainings in the world, this is one of the only books that actually addresses what a yoga teacher does. And without being, this is a prescription.
Yes.
It's meant for people to understand how to be a yoga teacher. And it does address what I think are the major philosophic issues of our time in yoga, which is, what does it mean to be physically and intellectually, emotionally, imaginatively, and with your breath liberated? What do we mean by freedom, and how do we define that? How do we go about teaching people to live in a way that it allows them to evolve, to discover the things within themselves that are worthy of cultivation? And that's what a yoga teacher does.
It's also the case that we don't teach this from any particular style or discipline in this book. This is applicable to any kind of yoga that you do. It isn't just about how Ed or I practice. So that kind of foundational material is available to everybody. It's versatile in that way.